Hello Cougars, my name is Matt Pileski and I teach social studies out of room 800 here at Coronado High School. And I was asked to talk a little bit about the flipped classroom model, what it is, how I've used it in my classroom, as well as some of the successes and challenges that I've encountered while using it. A flipped classroom is when the activities that traditionally occur inside the classroom, like lecture or direct teacher instruction, are recorded and the students watch them at home. Then those things that we traditionally have given as homework assignments, like practice or the application of the things we learned, occurs in the classroom with the teacher. So for example, instead of me giving that lecture on the Declaration of Independence in class and then sending my kids home to read this document from 1776, I could record my lecture to provide the background knowledge, and then in class, we could read, discuss, and analyze it together. So why are we doing this now? COVID forced us to flip our classrooms far faster than we're probably comfortable with. But rather than returning entirely to our traditional way of doing things, now is a great time to implement some new lessons with the resources that we created over the last year and a half. So instead of throwing out all those videos you spent hours recording, let's continue to use them so we can diversify our classroom instruction and help our students. I'd like to start by actually asking you to think about a lesson in your classroom that you think would be really useful in a flipped classroom model. Perhaps it's one of those lectures that you already recorded during COVID, or maybe it's a homework assignment that your students have always struggled with when you send them to work on it at home by themselves. So take a second and kind of get that lesson in your head. Of course, if this meeting had been flipped, I'd ask you to just pause the video and maybe write down that idea. But for now, let's just go ahead and picture it, and then we'll use it as it relates to your classroom culture and your curriculum. There's lots of different ways to approach this and different levels of how flipped you want your classroom to be. So I'll use my classroom as an example just for the purpose of this video. I decided to flip my classroom about 6 years ago, and until COVID hit, I did not flip it entirely. It started out when my students performed poorly on one particular unit of the AP exam. So I decided the next year I was going to flip just that one unit to see if it made a difference. And that one unit went from being the worst unit in 2015 to the second highest performing unit in 2016. And the only thing I changed was that I recorded my lectures and had students watch them at home, and then the homework assignments we did in class. So let's take a look at the process of how you can flip your classroom. There are a lot of different flipped classroom services out there like Screencastify, Loom, Screencast-O-Matic, and PlayPosit. But I use Edpuzzle along with about 40 other teachers on our campus. And if this meeting had been flipped, now would be a great time where you could pause and rewind and go back to write down those services that I just listed out. But we'll make this presentation available, so if you want to go back, you're able to. I personally like Edpuzzle because I can upload my lectures to YouTube, and then it's easy to select them in Edpuzzle, along with a lot of other channels like Khan Academy, TED Talks, Nat Geo, Crash Course, things like that. And the thing I like about Edpuzzle is that the lectures will stop themselves if kids minimize the window, if they click to a different tab. So it kind of forces the kids to be at least a little more creative in how they try to ignore me. As my students watch my videos, I'm able to add questions to check their understanding as they watch, very similar to the questions we would ask in class. And I get answers from every single kid. And I can place multiple choice questions as well as open-ended questions that they have to respond to. And I like to end my lectures by asking them to summarize what they just saw and heard. In addition, as the teacher, you can add notes to a video. So if you're assigning a Khan Academy lesson for your math class, and you know from experience that kids tend to get hung up on step 3 of a 5-step problem, you can remind your students of that even though it was Khan Academy that created the lesson. And Edpuzzle captured a lot of data about students' performance as well. So I can see that on this lecture, Aaron Anderson, Melissa Kingman, and Julie Bulkin did not watch it at all. In addition, I can see that Matt Aberman watched my video, but didn't perform too well on those questions that I placed throughout it. I can also see that Teresa Holyoke crushed it. So I know that I can lean on her a little bit in class to help explain a concept if I'm not getting a lot of participation. And then I can dive into individual questions and how students performed. I always take the worst performing question from each video and address it at the beginning of my next class. So if less than half of my students understood the section on the Green Revolution, I can reteach that concept, as well as rely on those 13 students who did understand it to maybe help rephrase what I was saying or partner up with somebody who didn't understand the concept. And then I can look at how each student performed on each question. I can see which distractors were especially troublesome for students. And this provides a great opportunity to figure out their train of thought. I think this would work great in math to track which step students misunderstood, or maybe foreign language when you're conjugating verbs to see if students understand the conjugations with different pronouns. But it really can be whatever you want it to be. So after my kids watch the lecture at home, what am I doing in class? Well, I've introduced the concept. So I'm going to start class the next day with my warm-up that reinforces it, gets them thinking about human geography. And then I can address that really challenging question and reteach it if I need to. And then I'm free to do any variety of different classroom activities that maybe traditionally we haven't had the time to do. I've started using gallery walks and case studies and class discussions, and I have more time for timed writes. So many different things that I have more time to do now because I'm not lecturing in class as often. Essentially, my video lectures introduce the concept, key ideas, vocabulary, but the really challenging activities, the things that force students to do the difficult and thought-provoking work, happens in the classroom when I can assist and support them. There's gonna be hiccups, there's gonna be challenges, but I'm there to help them through it. And it allows me to individualize what's happening in class and outside of class for each student. So that's how I've utilized the flipped classroom model, but let's talk about some of the successes and challenges that go along with it. Using this model, we're able to more effectively hit those higher DOK stages, those deeper, enduring understandings, which leads to increased student performance. If you're so inclined, I hyperlinked an article that is a review of research that's been done on flipped classrooms. And in that review, they pointed out that 52% of studies reported higher student performance from flipped classrooms. Our instruction can be more individualized. Not only are our lectures individualized because students can pause, rewind, or slow down our instruction, but the in-person activities can be as well. If Teresa crushed the formative assessments from my video, I can partner up with Matt, who struggled a little bit. Or maybe I want Teresa to start working on more challenging concepts from this discussion, while I pull Matt and some of the other students that struggled to do a small group. Finally, our instruction is more consistent. We've all had those class periods that can get off the rails with like 43,000 questions, and then first period ends 10 minutes early because nobody says anything. And then what about those kids that missed class? Now, every student receives the exact same instruction, and they can individualize it for themselves by slowing it down and things like that. And then our classroom practice and application has greater flexibility. But what do we do with the Aaron Andersons, Melissa Kingmans, and Julie Balkans of the world who refuse to watch my incredibly engaging video lecture? That was the greatest challenge that was identified by the review of research, with 13% of studies reporting that students didn't watch the lecture before coming to class. But there are a few ways that I've addressed this in my room. First, I've treated the video lecture like I did with homework before it. I made it for a grade, so there's a grade incentive associated with it. But I've also, more recently, started to focus on other ways to get kids engaged with it. I use my warm-up activity to review those major concepts from the lecture. Maybe it's an introductory video followed by a discussion of the things that everyone struggled with, whether they watched it or not. So students get an opportunity to hear the material before we dive in and start applying it. And since the in-classroom practice and application is more individualized, I can say, hey, Aaron, Melissa, Julie, you get to go watch that lecture right now, and then I'll be back in 10 minutes to work with you guys on our in-classroom work. So let's practice a little bit of what we've talked about. Here's a multiple choice question, like one that I would include in a video. All of the following are benefits of the flipped classroom model except what? And I can provide proper wait time on a question like this, even though it's a recorded lecture. And I can do it while bringing in my personality and my ridiculous classroom culture. So every time I ask a question in a video lecture, this is what I do. I know it's ridiculous, but the kids actually really like Dora running across the screen. And we said that we can use open-ended questions as well. So, what would be the greatest benefit with your classroom culture and your curriculum from flipping at least one lesson? I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation together, but I just wanted to say that if you have any questions while you're preparing to flip some part of your classroom, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, my name is Matt Pileski. I'm in room 800, and I'm not any kind of expert, but if I can help in any way, I'm willing to do that. Thank you guys so much.